Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the podcast. To be honest, I am recording this while sitting in traffic, so I don't know if it is going into the private podcast or if it's going into the public podcast, which, by the way, if you are listening to this and I've made a decision to go ahead and pop this onto the public podcast, then if you have not yet subscribed to get your special invitation to the private podcast, then what are you even doing? What are you even doing? Make sure you visit SharaniMBatak.com/connect so that you can sign up for the Revolutionary Times and get your special invitation to what's actually known as the Secret Podcast. It has a more formal and official name, but publicly I talk about it as the Secret Podcast. And that is a private community members podcast only. It is where we gather much more intimately. And the fact that I'm telling you about this and you're not yet in the secret podcast tells me that this is most likely going to be an episode of the public podcast. And so let's just go ahead and welcome you to the podcast. I am your host, Sharani M. Batak. I'm a healer to big-hearted type A visionary leaders that know they are here for world-changing work. They are here to change the world, and they know that systems of oppression, the very systems of oppression that they are here to eradicate, must first be dismantled and eradicated within themselves. And so they come to me for that very, very deep space holding, coaching, mentorship, healership, so that they can do the work to start dismantling all of that internalized supremacy. And then they can go out there and very cleanly and competently and confidently do their revolutionary change-making work. And so if that excites you, then like I said, head on over to SharaniMBatak.com, explore all the different ways that you can work with me, that you can connect with me, all the good things, all right? All the good things. And so with that said, we're going to just jump straight into today's episode. I'm about to be late for my doctor's appointment. Hopefully they still let me in. And actually, the fact that I'm going to a doctor's appointment is so perfect to this conversation that you and I are about to be having today. Now, and actually, I want to back up and say that, and if you don't know exactly, like if you're new here and you don't know exactly what I mean when I talk about internalized supremacy, then please go listen to the 110 episodes of the podcast that precede this one. Actually, is it 110 or is it more than 110? I cannot remember at this point, and I cannot keep count. It's been 5 years and well over 100 episodes. So if you are like scratching your head thinking, what does she even mean by internalized supremacy? What does she even mean by supremacy culture? Then scroll you into all of the other, like I said, like maybe 110 episodes that precede this one and get to studying. This entire episode is all about all of the ways that we have internalized supremacy culture and what it is that you need to do about that if we are to build and create our new world. The things that we talk about are applicable to you, whether you lead yourself, lead your home, lead teams at work, lead an entire organization, or lead community efforts. It does not matter what you lead or who you lead. If you are a leader in any way, shape, or form, and like I said, that includes self-leadership, then this podcast is for you, and my work is for those of you who are those visionary leaders that know you're here to do big work to change the world. So anyways, with that said, it's so perfect that I'm actually headed to a doctor's appointment right now because that is what this episode is all about. Today we're going to be talking about the medical industrial complex and their gross negligence. Straight up fucking negligence of, we already know that they are beyond negligent of women's health and reproductive health. Well, not just reproductive health, women's reproductive health. Because if a man were to bleed as profusely as women do, and if men were to suffer as profusely as women do, they'd have had this shit figured out a long time ago. Because if they was bleeding out their dick every month as profusely as we do, then they'd have figured this shit out a long, long time ago. Yes, they would have. And so with that said, today I want to share for the first time ever, actually it's not true, I did share on a reel last night, that, it was actually it was supposed to be a funny, but it was also someone raising awareness. It was a black man talking about how women be bleeding profusely and they just be standing in line at the coffee shop getting their, caramel macchiatos and shit like that. They'll just be at the parent-teacher conference bleeding profusely, and that is where I, for the first time, more publicly shared my story. It was just a couple paragraphs, but I've been percolating on it, and I've known that this episode needed to happen. I've known for a while that I need to share with you the experience of the health shit that I have been walking through, quite frankly now, for the last 4.5 fucking years, and it got really, really bad a year ago. And then they were like, oh my God, this isn't okay. And I'm like, oh my God, then why did all of your fucking doctors for 3.5 motherfucking years tell me that there is nothing wrong with me when I came in here for 3.5 fucking years in a row complaining of profusely heavy menstrual bleeding, changes in my cycle, all the fucking things. Because I've been tracking my cycle since I came off of birth control back when I was in my early 30s, okay? Well, somewhere around my mid-30s, early to mid-30s. I know it's been a while because I've been tracking for a very long time. And so I know that my cycles have been changing. And so why for 3.5 years did your medical providers in the GYN department tell me that there is absolutely nothing wrong? And that it's fine, and that it's normal. And then the year that I completely crash out and my body completely gives out on me, now you're telling me, oh my God, that's not okay, that's very heavy bleeding. Yeah, bitch, that's what I've been telling you people. But anyways, let's come back. Let's bring it back. Obviously, I'm very passionate about this topic, and actually, I am, traffic is moving now, and I'm about to be at the doctor's. My appointment is in 1 minute, but I probably have about 3 minutes until I get there. So I might have to record a part 2 for you, or figure out how to, merge the 2 audio files myself. Or you'll just get a part 1 and a part 2. We'll see how this goes down. But anyhow, so for 3.5 years, and if you have a uterus, or if you love someone who has a uterus, then this podcast right here is for you. And listen very, very closely, because I'm going to be sharing with you some very, very crucial information. And I'm having the courage to speak up. I will just say, I am having the courage to speak up because I've seen, July was National Fibroid Awareness Month, and then I heard people like Tiffany Haddish came out and talked about her fibroid story, and then I heard that, and then a friend of mine sent over, I think it was Venus Williams, and her fibroid removal story, and so it's one of those things where, seeing other people speak up about it, especially famous people, using their platforms to build awareness and to speak about this, has really given me the courage to more publicly share the story, because I wanted to keep it private until I made it through the other side. I am still in process right now. I'm scheduled for a procedure in 10 days, and we're going to talk about that procedure because I cannot even with what horrific things they tried to tell me that I needed. Mind you, after their complete and utter medical incompetence and medical negligence for 3.5 fucking years. And when I say medical incompetence, what I mean, oh man, no turn on red. What I mean is that, you should know, as a medical provider, you should know that 70 to 80% of women in their 30s to 50s will at some point be diagnosed with fibroids. So when how old was I back then? 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago, I was 37, 38, 39, 40, 41. Yes, I was 37 years old, right smack in between that 30 to 50 years of age, right? And if I'm coming into you complaining of changes in my cycle and profuse, heavily menstrual bleeding, but it didn't meet their, oh, you're bleeding for 10 days, oh, you're not bleeding for 10 days, oh, you don't have a problem. Okay? Again, we'll talk more about this. But the point being that the medical incompetence of if 70 to 80% of women between the ages of 30 and 50 are going to at some point in their lives get diagnosed with a fibroid, and that the rates are much higher for women of African American descent and other women of color, if the rates are higher for us, then why the fuck, if someone comes in and tells you this shit, would you not fucking investigate further? Why would you just pat them on the head, say, there, you're fine, there's nothing wrong, there's no issues here, come back if it gets worse? Which I did, mind you, for 3.5 fucking years. I came back over and over and over again. All right, my loves, we're gonna have to pause here and just, oh, hi, that was my mic that was attached to my, seatbelt. All right. We're going to have to come back in part 2 this because I have arrived. And so BRB, my love. Okay, my loves. Whew! I am back. And I do believe that this is recording. I wasn't sure if it was or wasn't going to be recording. So thank you for your patience with me. Oh, now you're going to hear all the bells and whistles my car has. You know what? We're just going to put it back into park because there's a lot of cars right now. By the way, welcome to a driving podcast with my neurospicy brain. If you saw the, what is it? I posted a reel on Instagram yesterday. Yesterday being 8/10, today being 8/11/2025, when I'm recording this, but if you saw my reel yesterday, then the message I shared is that there is no more masking. There is no more masking who we are. There's no more masking what we're doing. Of course, if you are ill, definitely be masking because we are practicing community care. But I'm talking about masking who you are, what you stand for, what you do, your different abilities, disabilities, illnesses in terms of like visible or invisible, but if you are sick, you have a cold, you have COVID, you have the flu, stay the fuck home and put your mask on. Practice community care. Other than that, my loves, we are back. We're on the road heading back. And, so welcome to my neurospicy brain. In the wild. So we were in the midst of discussing my medical stuff and the complete and utter medical negligence and incompetence. We were sharing statistics that 70 to 80% of women between the ages of 30 and 50 are going to develop a diagnosis of fibroids. And that those rates are on the higher side and higher end for Black women and other women of color. Now, I have other thoughts about why that might be, and I'm not going to go there right now because this conversation for us today right now is about the medical industrial complex and really, one, sharing my story, and two, what was it called? And two, raising awareness about this issue. So, as I mentioned, I have been tracking my cycles since I quit taking birth control. And I had been on birth control for half of my life. Was it half of my life or more than half of my life by the time I stopped taking birth control? My body was just like, we're done. We can't do this anymore. It's time. It's time to just get off the birth control. And so I did. I got off the birth control, and then I started tracking my cycles on a paper calendar that I still have somewhere. I should pull it out because I am curious how long it's been since I have not had birth control and how long since I've been tracking my cycles. But I used to keep it on a paper calendar, and after a few years of that, a loved one said, why aren't you just using an app? Here's the app I use. It does all the numbers for you. It tracks all the symptoms for you. It tells you your cycle length, all those things. And so and at this point I was on the early mid-30s at that point. By the time I stopped birth control, I think I might have been 33 or so by the time I stopped birth control. And, so tracking my cycles, and then, things started to change. Like I said, about 4 years ago, I noticed that my, bleeds were getting heavier and my cycles were getting, shorter by a day or so. I had gotten into, of course, I know that after you stop taking hormonal birth control, it is going to alter your cycle a little bit. It's going to mess with some things. You're going to have some differences in your cycle. But I had gotten into a regular flow. No pun intended. But my cycles had gotten into a regular flow, and they were predictable and, all the things. But then things started changing. Maybe they started changing 3.5 or 4.5 years ago. And after a while, I was like, it's getting more and more. I really ought to go in. Now, my cycles at that point were still, my bleed was still only 5 days, quote unquote, only. But like I said, they had started to get shorter and closer together consistently, only by a day or two. But as someone who's really aware of my body and really aware of things, I was like, yeah, this is actually really different. And then the flow started changing. The actual menstrual flow started changing. And I was like, there's something going on. At that point, I didn't have a regular GYN. I am a part of Kaiser. If you live in a state with Kaiser, you know how absolutely wonderful Kaiser is. And I say that with all sarcasm. I have not had good experiences with Kaiser. But when you're at a certain price, income, and you have a certain price point, a certain budget for your health care, you take what you can get, right? And so, I was with Kaiser, have been with Kaiser, so I just made an appointment with the GYN department, right? And I went and I saw the first person complained of, changes in my menstrual cycle, changes in my flow. I was told, you're fine, your bleeding is less than 10 days, you're not spotting in between, it's normal, your cycle will change. Nobody asked a family history. Nobody recognized, oh, you are a brown woman in your 30s, maybe we should check out. Nobody, okay? They said, come back if things change. A year later, things continued to change. So I went back in and I said, hey, met with someone different. And I said, hey, my cycles are still changing. And they did the whole regular thing. They did the whole, well, you're not bleeding for 10 days. You're not bleeding in between periods. Your cycle is going to change how long it is in terms of how many days your cycle is. So you're fine, you're normal, nothing's wrong. Come back if things get worse. Again, no family medical history taken, no personal history taken, didn't ask any of the right questions, no scans recommended. Again, statistic is 70 to 80% of women, especially higher rates for women of color, get fibroids. Nobody. So here we go. And things continue to change with my menstrual cycles. Because again, I track this shit. By now I'm in an app. By now I am tracking in an app. I am tracking this shit. And for the third year in a row, I went in and I said, hey, my cycles are changing. They're coming even closer together. It's getting heavier. I'm going through my menstrual cup. At that time, I was using menstrual cups. The menstrual cup that is supposed to last 12 hours, I am having to change every 4 hours. At that point, it was every 4 hours for the menstrual cup. And I didn't know it then, but I know it now. The menstrual cup was also starting to put way too much pressure. At some point, I couldn't even, the menstrual cups were too painful. So I started experimenting with different menstrual cups. Again, no family history, no scans recommended, and none of that. Just, you're fine, you're not bleeding for 10 days, you're not bleeding between your cycles, and so you are, and your cycles will change, so there's nothing wrong, there is no problem, you're just fine, be gone, basically. Basically it was, so be gone, right? And come back if things change. So a year and a half, not even a full year and a half after that, we are now in 2024. It was just a little over a year after that. So it was May because, we had a life circumstance happen. And so we were just trying to get all the medical appointments in. And that's when I had gone and seen them that last time, the GYN department at Kaiser. And again, same old song and dance that they do. You're fine, there's nothing wrong, even though I have evidence to support that there's something wrong. Now, at that point, I did not know what I know now about fibroids, which, like I said, is why I am now doing this very detailed podcast episode about my health and what I have been walking through, because if this episode helps just one person, my job is done. Just like if my post on that one person's reel last night helps just one person, my job is done. My hope is that it reaches more than just one person, of course. My hope is that you remember this story and this information somewhere in there so that when you, as a person with a uterus, or when you, as someone who loves someone with a uterus, start to hear some of these things go on, or starts to notice some of these things go on, you can think back and say, hey, I heard about this on a podcast once. This person was sharing their story with me, with us. There is a problem. It must get checked out. It must have imaging done. Okay? Imaging done. And do not, under any circumstances, let the medical industrial complex fucking gaslight you into believing that there is nothing wrong when you clearly know the wisdom of your body is telling you something different. Okay? So that is why I'm sharing such detailed, personal, and intimate information with you right now in this story so that your brain can remember, I've heard about this somewhere. And even if you don't remember that it was Sharani where you heard it, at least your brain will remember, I heard this somewhere. And that you will take the actions to get support. So anyways, it's May, June of 2023. I have just seen the doctor again for the third fucking year in a row to be told for the third year in a fucking row that you're fine, you're normal, there's nothing wrong. Again, no scans have been done, no family history has been taken. Now, we're in July 2024. July 2024. I'm living my merry little life. Now, mind you, this entire time, as my cycles have been changing, and as I have been documenting and tracking my cycles and all of the changes that I've been experiencing, this whole time, I've also been dealing with, chronic health, fatigue, literally, not health fatigue, but chronic health things, like fatigue. And of course, we were in the era of COVID. Not that COVID is gone. It is still here. But we were in the height of everything. And so it was always why am I feeling so lethargic? Why do I feel so much malaise? Why do I not have energy for life? Why am I feeling fluish and feverish? COVID tests were always negative, but there was always some low grade of something that I was feeling, and it didn't feel good. Didn't feel good. This low grade of whatever it was. Okay. So I'm saying I'm living my merry little life, but it is important to add I'm living my merry little life with these chronic fatigue, chronic flu-like symptoms, constantly why am I always feeling sick, but COVID tests are always negative, or there's no actual temperature and things like that. Okay. So again, make a mental note. If you're feeling tired all the time, that might be a sign, and your cycles are changing, that might be a sign that something's up, and to ask for that scan, the ultrasound. And if they refuse doing an ultrasound, make them document that they are refusing to give you an ultrasound. It's going to be very important to have that kind of stuff documented. And then usually they will not want to document that they are denying you and refusing you services. And so they will turn around and be like, okay, fine, here's the test. Typically, that's how it works. Okay? So, where were we? It is now July 2024. I am in Mexico, and I'm eating all the yummy, delicious food. All the yummy, delicious food. So good. So good. We were in Puerto Vallarta and having all the yummy, delicious food. And yeah. Oh no. I just parked and so I lost my microphone again. We're back. All the yummy, delicious food. Hold on. I'm going to pause this momentarily. And we're back. I just had to pause real fast because I had to turn my car off and did not want to accidentally lose the recording. So anyhow, we're in Mexico. It's the end of June. It's actually technically the end of June 2024. I'm eating all the yummy, delicious food. And after several days of all the raw onions and raw garlic and spicy food, I got sick. And normally I have no problems. I used to love spicy food, all the things, right? Got sick. We cut our trip short, all the things. And then just a couple days after we got back, I actually turned 40. I was having a birthday celebration. We had a paint party. Shout out to Karen here locally in the Bay Area who does at-home paint parties. It was amazing. It was wonderful. Had a great time. And then again, tanked. My health tanked again. Felt like shit most of July. Couldn't fucking do anything. And then at the end of July last year, 2024, I got food sick again. And by that point, and then at that point, actually, I could not eat. I couldn't keep, and not that I couldn't keep food down. I was so bloated that I could not eat. And so I was like, fuck it. I'm going to the doctor and I'm going to go physically in person so they can see what is going on. So I go in there and I was not pleased with the doctor. I was not impressed. Terrible bedside manner, saw me. She was bothered I was there. I wasn't her regular, patient. I just needed whoever was the first person that was available, right? But she took one look at me and my bloated stomach. Also, I forgot to mention in this lethargy and all that other stuff that I had been experiencing, I also started gaining significant amounts of weight out of nowhere. Not doing anything differently. And I know, I'm not trying to be fat phobic here, but I know that my body, looks and feels a certain way at certain weights. Okay. And so I was gaining all this weight. I was puffy. I was bloated. I couldn't eat, all the things. This doctor took one look at me and says, you have anemia. And I'm like, what? I'm here for a digestive issue, and she's telling me I have anemia. And then, here's the kicker. I'm like, well, why hasn't it shown? If I have anemia, why hasn't it shown up before? Or what needs to happen? I can't remember what I asked her exactly. I think I asked her what needs to happen. And she's like, well, we're going to do a blood test. And if that blood test is low, but only if that blood test is low, then will they run further testing on that same blood sample to check my ferritin levels. Okay? If you are listening, remember that word, checking your ferritin levels. Well, the word to remember is ferritin. The phrase is checking your ferritin levels. And this doctor ended up telling me that they do not check ferritin levels unless the iron levels are abnormally low, like in the regular blood work. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? Good information for me to know, and for anyone who's in the Kaiser system to know, that if you're feeling this way, and they're running just a regular iron test, if you're still in the green, even if you're barely in the green, it is not going to trigger a ferritin test. Now, ferritin is your body's iron stores and reserves, okay? That is how much iron is like stored in your body in order to function, okay? So anyhow, iron comes back horribly low. So of course, the system automatically triggers doing a ferritin test. My ferritin test levels were so low, it was 6. My ferritin was at a 6. It's supposed to be 30 to 90, okay? I mean, don't quote me on that, but it's supposed to be much higher than 6. And my doctor, my regular doctor, who I do love and adore, there is one gem in the Kaiser system, but my ferritin levels were so low that my regular primary care doctor said, oh my gosh, this is really bad. This is really low. We need to get you in for IV iron infusions because we need to get your iron back up pronto. Like, yes, iron supplementation is good, but it's not going to work fast enough for how severely low your iron is. Now, mind you, in the past year and a half, things had gotten, or in the past year or so, and it was actually not even a full year and a half, because I saw the other doctor June of 2020, May of 2023, and now we're at July, August of 2024. So it had just been over a year. Now, mind you, in that time, I had to stop using a menstrual cup because it was too painful. There was too much pressure. Like, it felt like it was just too painful, and I had to switch to a menstrual disc. Wish I would have made that change sooner, because the menstrual disc is like, oh my God, amazing. And it has a higher capacity than the menstrual cup. It has like the capacity of 5 or 6 super tampons, okay? And at that point, again, it is supposed to last 12 hours before you rinse it and put it back in, okay? At that point, my flow had progressed to where I was changing out. I had to dump, and the menstrual disc has an auto dump feature, which is beautiful and amazing. So it helps, like, it dumps it out without you having to stick your hands in there every time, unlike a menstrual cup. But, yeah, if you're thinking about making the switch, make the switch. And, so anyhow, at that point, it was every 4 hours that I was having to change out, dump out, fully start over with the menstrual cup. And I was explaining the menstrual disc, my bad. And the doctors are like, oh my God, that's so much. Oh my God, that's really heavy. Oh my God. And I'm like, really? Because for 3.5 years, you people told me it's fine. And now here we are with such bad anemia that I can barely function in life. Okay. So doctor orders the IV iron, my regular PCP, who I do like, who is a gem in the Kaiser system. So she orders the iron infusion and she orders an ultrasound. We're at 3.5 years of me complaining about this issue, more than 3.5 years at that point, before anyone thought to order a fucking ultrasound. This is why I'm telling you, if you are having changes, order a ferritin, make your doctor order the ferritin test, first of all, ferritin, and an ultrasound. I had been talking just about the ultrasound because I forgot about the ferritin. But the ferritin is equally as important as an ultrasound. So she orders the ultrasound, and lo and behold, there is a 6.5 centimeter fibroid growing in my uterus. And it's in a position, it's in a location, in the inner uterine lining area, which causes profusely heavy menstrual bleeding. At that time, it was a submucosal fibroid, and that is the type of fibroid that has the most amount of bleeding, or contributes to really heavy menstrual bleeding and anemia and really painful cycles, all the things. So yeah, more than 3.5 years for them to order a scan and to do the proper testing before Kaiser discovered a 6.5 centimeter fibroid. Which, by the way, did not grow to 6.5 centimeters overnight. Had they done what they were supposed to do, like ask a full history, or take a family history, or order any scans or tests beforehand, they would have known and been able to catch this sooner. But no, they did none of that. None. And so now here I am, and I'm like, great, what do I do? What's the solve? What's the treatment? By that point, I did pick a GYN. I liked her. She was a whippersnapper. She was good. She didn't shame me for doing research on the internet for my own body because, you know, she patiently listened when I did mention to her all the research I was getting on Google U and IGU, aka Instagram University and Google University. And she listened and she was like, okay, yeah, those are legit angles, right? Cause I also thought this whole time with all these symptoms, it must be perimenopause that I'm going through. Okay? Cause my mom had mentioned that she went through menopause early. So I'm thinking, okay, that must be what it is. So I'm talking about all this with the new GYN I had elected. And so, but the fibroid and the profuse heavy bleeding and the anemia were top priority. Okay? So, she tells me your options are birth control, the IUD, which, you know, oral birth control, the hormonal IUD, or, you know, she could do this minor-ish procedure, but the fibroid at that point had been so big that it would take multiple procedures to do a minimally invasive because there is something called a hysteroscopic myomectomy where they could actually go in through your vaginal canal because of the type of fibroid I had and where it was located, that they would be able to go in vaginally and shave it off. Well, they were not able to do that or in one go because it had grown to 6.5 centimeters. Now, remember how I talked about the fact that for 3.5 years prior, I had gone in complaining? Well, had someone done their job, 3 people, I saw 3 separate GYNs, not a single fucking one of them did their fucking job. Okay? And so had they asked the right questions, had they mentioned any of those things, had they ordered the scans or the tests or anything, we could have gotten this sooner. Okay? But let me tell you. So she tells me your options are oral birth control, hormonal birth control, the IUD, or, you know, this procedure, or a, what was the other one? Or a hysterectomy. And I was like, oh, hell no. At this point, I had barely turned 40. And I was like, We are not doing a hysterectomy here. Abso-fucking-lutely not. And at that point, everything was just so new and fresh. I'm like, I need to think about this. I know that hormonal options are not for me. I was on hormonal birth control for half my life, and my body said no more. And that is when I stopped taking the hormonal birth control. So anyhow, that's where we're at. And I was like, so we were just like, okay, well, let's address the anemia. Went on something called tranexamic acid. It's supposed to help with the heavy profuse bleeding. Guess what? Oh, and I started getting the iron infusions. And actually, there's two guess whats. Guess what? I'm allergic to the one and done iron. And I worked with the most amazing, like, God put her in my life. She is amazing. Diane over at the IV infusion clinic. And she goes very slow and gently with her patients. And she discovered that I'm actually allergic to iron dextran. I think it was iron dextran. The one and done iron. Where you go in, you have one infusion, you're done. Fucking allergic to that shit. So then we have to start the process all over again and wait for more appointments and all the things. And still got my iron IV infusions, but instead of a one and done, we are now looking at 5 weeks in a row. Venifer, iron sucrose. Diane had told me that people who are allergic to this iron dextran are often okay with iron sucrose. And she sent my doctor a message, all the things. And so instead of a one-time treatment, now we're looking at getting poked and prodded by needles and having to go into the IV clinic 5 fucking weeks in a row. But lo and behold, it worked. It worked. And my energy levels boosted back up. I was like, oh my God, I feel alive again. I have a zest for life. Periods, still heavy. Heavy as fuck. Even on the medication and actually taking the tranexamic acid, my periods were now actually 10 days long. Prior to that, I didn't have that problem. But taking this medication, it was like less, what's it called? Less profuse heavy bleeding, but over a more prolonged time. And that really fucking sucked. So I'm just going through life. I'm going through life. And about 2.5 cycles later, I start to notice my energy levels tanking again. By this point, I was working with a naturopath. And I said to her, my energy levels are tanking again. And I think the anemia might be coming back because the profuse heavy bleeding continues. And she said, okay, because you're paying privately, because I did have to pay the naturopath privately because naturopathy is not covered by Kaiser. So I end up, she orders a ferritin test. And after all of my IV infusion treatments had worked, my iron had bumped up to like in the 80s, 90s, or my ferritin had bumped up to 80s, 90s. Great, good, awesome. Well, now we're in February, early February, late Jan, early Feb of 2025. So we're here now, and she checks my ferritin. And sure enough, my ferritin has dipped back down into the 30s. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? So I email my Kaiser doctor, my PCP, who's a rock star. And I said, hey, it's dipping again. My naturopath ordered ferritin. It's in the low 30s. Please order the regular iron blood work and the ferritin. Get this. Regular iron comes back low. But it's still in the green. Okay? It's still in the green. But because I had specifically asked also to track my ferritin, it showed that my ferritin had dipped into the 20s at that point. Within a span of just days, it had dipped from 30s at Quest to 20s at Kaiser. I think it was like maybe a week between the two. And I'm like, great. So, of course, she orders the IV iron. I'm like, there's no fucking way I can do 5 weeks in a row again. like, can we do 3? She's like, okay, fine, we'll do 3. And then I also started supplementing iron because I was like, well, the last time I didn't supplement iron, let me try supplementing iron too. But we're going to go back to when the doctor with the awful bedside manner said to me that they will only check your ferritin levels if your iron levels are not in the green. And mind you, what I just said about my labs in February was that my regular iron levels were still technically in the green, very low green, but still technically in the green. But my ferritin had tanked and was not in the green. You catching my drift here? Because that tells me that all those times that Kaiser did do the testing and it was low, it's possible that my ferritin was still abnormal, even though my iron may have shown normal range. Low normal, but still normal. And so again, I'm sharing this with you so that you know, ask for the ultrasound, ask for the ferritin, specifically the ferritin, and make them document if they refuse you this service. Because I did not know this at the time. And now I know, and I'm using my platform to help other people know. And now let's come back. So we're in February, but I want to take us back because this is how my neurospicy brain works. We're going to go back to September when they discovered this 6.5 centimeter fibroid, okay? Because I thought the problem was resolved. And no. So we come back, backtracking to September. They discover this 6.5 centimeter fibroid. That's when I remembered, oh, right. I actually had an ultrasound done once, years ago. And they told me I had a 1 centimeter fibroid, but nothing to be concerned about, just watchful waiting. Now, mind you, they didn't tell me, or at least I don't recall, they didn't tell me what things to look for, how I would know if it was getting bad. And remember how I mentioned that for 3.5 fucking years, every fucking year, I went into Kaiser's GYN department and told them there's heavy bleeding, my cycle is changing, and for 3 years, they did not do scans, they did not ask the right questions, they did not mention the F word. Because had anyone said, you know, do you have a family history or do you have a history of fibroids? I would have said, what's that? And they would have told me, and I would have said, you know, a while ago I did have a scan, an ultrasound that said I had a 1 centimeter fibroid. They told me to watch for it, but I didn't know what to watch for, so here I am, right? But nobody fucking told me that that's what I would have to watch for. And nobody fucking asked the question. I'm not a medical provider. It's not my job to fucking know what to ask for. And again, this is why I am sharing with immense detail my story here with you so that you can know. Okay? So had they asked the right questions, had they asked me if I've ever had a history of fibroids, I would have said, oh yeah, there was that one time. Had they asked me a family history, I would have told them, you know what? Every woman in my family has had a hysterectomy. Not every woman. My mom has not. But almost every woman in my family has had a hysterectomy. But did they ask my family history? They did not. For 3.5 motherfucking years in a row. They did not. And so here we are. In September, because we backtracked from February to September, and they're telling me you have a 6.5 centimeter fibroid, and your options are oral birth control, a hormonal IUD, this minor procedure, which actually wouldn't happen in one go because it's too big and it would require 2 procedures and it could get a little dangerous, and or a hysterectomy. So when in February my iron levels had tanked again and the tranexamic acid was not working, I said to them, and mind you, I hope you can hear at this point in my story how there were multiple points of failure on the end of the medical industrial complex and the system known as Kaiser. Okay? I'm sure you're hearing it, but I just want to point it out in case you forgot, in case you tuned out, in case you're like, oh my gosh, this woman just keeps talking and talking and this episode is so long. I want to remind you of that. Multiple points of failure on their part. Because it is not my job to know. And then doctors get pissed when we go to Google our symptoms and be like, what the fuck is going on? Right? And mind you, I thought it was perimenopause. But turns out when my iron levels were boosted and back up, I did not have a single one of those perimenopause symptoms. I was living life. All good. Okay? Okay. As long as we're on the same page here. So by February, when this thing has gotten worse, I said to the GYN, I said, okay, I'm ready to discuss the procedure. At this point, she flips the fuck out on me and tells me she can't do that procedure. She's not going to do it if my fibroid's really big. It's dangerous, blah, blah, blah. It'll take 3 times, blah, blah, blah. All the fucking things. And I'm like, whoa, because in the fall you told me you could do it. It would take 2 procedures, and now you're telling me this? She's like, you know what? Let's just do another ultrasound, see where it's at now. I said, okay, fine. We did another ultrasound. You can tell by the sound of my voice, it was not good. This fibroid had now grown from 6.5 centimeters to 9.1 centimeters in the span of 6 months between September and March when the next ultrasound had been done. And so at that point, the GYN at Kaiser tells me once again that my options are oral birth control, an IUD, or a hysterectomy. The same medical industrial complex that neglected to take me seriously, that neglected to ask the right questions, that neglected to take a full and thorough history, that gaslit me and said you're fine and there's nothing wrong without doing any of the proper assessment, evaluation, scans, or testing, and let it get this far, is now telling me that your option is a hysterectomy. Because, of course, the birth control pills and the IUD are not going to stop this fibroid from growing. They're just going to stop the profuse heavy bleeding. As you can imagine, I was livid beyond belief. Livid. Abso-fucking-lutely livid. And my loves, my phone is overheating. And so I am going to pause here for a moment. And we are almost at an hour for this episode. But we're going to pause here. I'm going to run into the store, get these groceries that I need. Hopefully that'll give my phone some time to cool down. And then I will be back with more. Okay, my loves, I am back. And it's really funny. In the intermission, I was thinking about like, oh my gosh, if this were 20-minute episodes of like a show that you would have to like stop and come back to the following week, like, wouldn't that be like, oh my gosh, could you deal with the suspense? Would you be able to deal with the suspense? But anyhow, in the essence of time, is that what I want to say? I want to be mindful of time, and I want to be mindful of the fact that this episode is already just at almost an hour. And I do want to complete the story and bring you current. So I'm going to do my best to stay focused and contained. And let's pick back right where we left off. So now we are in March. It has been 6 months since Kaiser initially found the fibroid. And like I said, had they done a thorough history, had they asked the right questions, had they, rather than neglecting, to take my concerns seriously, rather than dismissing me, had they actually done their due diligence and, I don't know, done their fucking jobs, we could have likely addressed this way sooner, and they would have discovered and learned that, oh yeah, I did have a scan a bazillion years ago that showed a 1 centimeter fibroid. In looking at some of my other medical records, I discovered that was probably around 2014. And so by the time they quote unquote discovered it, 10 years had passed. But had they listened to me when I came to them in 2021 and 2022 and 2023, they would have found this before it got to as massive as it got. And it's interesting because I'm back home and I'm sitting here looking, there's a tennis ball on the floor from either Benji or the husband. I don't know, but someone's got a tennis ball on the floor. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, this fibroid at that point was even bigger than this tennis ball. And so, yeah, for perspective, we're not talking like 6.5 centimeters like it's nothing. And we're not talking about 9 centimeters like it's nothing. We're talking about larger than this tennis ball. And actually what they're saying is, fibroids between 9 and 10 centimeters are the size of a grapefruit. Yeah. And this is what's been growing inside of me and contributing to all of these challenges that I have been experiencing. And instead of taking me seriously, instead of taking a full and thorough history, instead of looking and knowing the science and the research that Black women and other women of color get, that all women get it at a rate of 70 to 80% of women get fibroids. And those rates are even higher for Black women and women of color. And had they put all of that into play and put all of their knowledge, all of the time, money, effort they went to school for, had they done their jobs and had they done their due diligence, we could have addressed this before it got to the point where my GYN was saying that the only option is a hysterectomy. And of course, at 40 years old, at that point I was almost 41 because we're talking about March. That was now 5 months ago. And I just turned 41 last month. And so that did not sit well with me. It did not sit right with me. I knew that was not the correct answer for me. And so I went back to my naturopath and I said, I know we've been working on gut health to rebuild everything that got wrecked from, it's a whole other conversation, from years of, what do we want to call it? What is it called? There's the medical industrial complex when it relates to actual like medical things, but then there's that, and there's big pharma when it relates to like the pharmaceutical industry. What is it called when it's all that like commercial farming industry, like, and our processed shitty ass food that we have in America? But that's a podcast for another day if I feel called to go there. For today, we're going to focus on the fact that I was working on gut health, especially because like this anemia wrecked my gut. Plus, like I said, all those years of eating, the standard American diet. Sad. Even though I was still eating clean, it's everywhere. It's in our food source. It's in our soil. It's everywhere. You cannot escape it. But anyhow, coming back to that. So I said to her, the doctor is saying a hysterectomy. That does not feel right to me. So what can we do? Can we try to shrink this thing naturally? And of course, I was not pleased with what that doctor said. So I called up member services and said, I need a second opinion. And they connected me. I got a second opinion within a couple days. They were able to schedule something with me. Well, little did I know, and little did the GYN tell me, that there were several other options that could have been an option. Back in the fall, when it was 6.5 centimeters, there was way more hope and way more that could have been done at that point. But she only knew the options of, what was it? Oral birth control, IUD, or a hysterectomy. She did not know that Kaiser offered an intrauterine. Well, she knew this later when I confronted her about it. She's like, yeah, I just didn't think that was the option for you. Oh my fucking God. But the second opinion doctor told me that there was uterine artery embolization. She told me there was a Sonata procedure, which is actually a laser procedure. I had looked into the Accessa procedure, because I have a friend who had success with that. Shout out to my friend, you know who you are. And, I was exploring any and all options and alternatives. And meanwhile, I'm being told that a hysterectomy is my only option. And upon a second opinion, there were all these other options that Kaiser already offers. But guess what? Because my fibroid at that point was 9.1 centimeters, I no longer qualified for any of these lesser invasive ones because it has to be 5 centimeters or less. Again, guess what? If the GYN who I had been meeting with told me this in the fall, again, we could have likely addressed it. But go figure, medical industrial complex, they're not going to tell you everything, and they're not going to train their providers to actually provide good quality care. They're going to train their providers in order to do whatever the bureaucratic red tape nonsense bullshit is. And that is one of the biggest qualms I have with Kaiser as a system, is that they don't actually take into account patient care. And this is true of any and all health insurance, right? They don't actually take into account patient care and what is best for the patient. They look at what is best for their bottom line. If they recommend a hysterectomy, guess what? They never have to do another fibroid surgery on this person again, right? It resolves the problem once and for all, as opposed to if someone is actually requesting a fibroid surgery or any of these other procedures, well, guess what? Fibroids also grow back. You can develop new ones and stuff like that. And so, of course, they're not going to give the other options because then they'll have to keep operating on you, right? And instead they're like, just cut it out. It's, not worth it. Just cut it out, right? Because that's a cheaper procedure for them to do than it is to keep continuing on the care that the patient actually needs and requires, right? And so coming back, so I was not pleased with the options. I got a second opinion. She told me what some of the other options are. Some of the options also included like really strong chemical hormone stuff that would put you in a chemically induced, menopause, like all these things. And none of those felt like the right options for me. And again, I've learned to be someone who listens to the wisdom of my body and what my body is telling me. I may not always know exactly what is going on, but I know what does and does not feel right for me. So I went back to my naturopath. We attempted a course. She said that she has successfully worked with people to shrink fibroids. And so here I was, low iron again. Because remember, they didn't actually test for ferritin. I had to ask for it, because if it was up to them and had I not known what to ask for very specifically, they would have just said your iron levels are fine. There's not a problem. But because at that point I had known enough about my body and the care that my body needed, I knew that I had to ask for the ferritin test as well. Because yes, my iron levels were still normal, but my ferritin was low. And thankfully my PCP made that referral again. So now I'm working with the naturopath to try to address and heal and shrink this thing naturally, because I wanted to go with whatever the least invasive options were. And I was also simultaneously getting more iron infusion treatment. So remember, I couldn't do the one and done. I had to do the one that was way more, it required multiple sittings, because I was allergic to the one and done one. And so I start to feel better. I swore that it was working. And then one of the conditions that my naturopath gave me was that I would have to get an ultrasound in order for her to do this procedure, because of how rapidly the fibroid was growing, that it was a condition of working with her that I would have to get an ultrasound done, about 6 to 8 weeks in, so we could see, is this treatment actually working? Is it doing what we want it to do, or is it not doing what we want it to do? In which case I would have to go and pursue whatever the doctor says from the conventional medicine option. Now, mind you, this whole entire time I have been sitting with and percolating on what the fuck I was going to do about how the system fucked me. Like, they created this problem. They neglected and dismissed the problem. And then when it came to actually, like, when things got really dire, they said, oh, the solution to the problem is just to cut out your uterus and throw it away as though it's disposable, right? So that is what they had done. And so I had a lot of feelings towards what to do about Kaiser, and my body was very clear that whatever the options were, it was not going to be through Kaiser. Well, anyhow, I'm working with the naturopath. I think everything is going well. And I went in for a scan at about 7 weeks into treatment with the naturopath. And the ultrasound came back as the fibroid continues to grow. So of course I was dejected, disheartened, and was just like, I don't even know anymore. And this was in June. Now we're back 2 months ago. It was June 2025, and I was just completely broken. And I had no plans of pursuing the care through Kaiser for this, because again, they are the reason it got this bad to begin with, right? And but I was willing to do whatever, blah, blah, blah nonsense they wanted while I figured out what I was going to do. And it was really interesting, because when the ultrasound results came and I saw the news that the fibroid continues to grow, I chatted with a friend, and she reminded me, like, just to pause and to soften and to check in with the fibroid and to check in with my body and to see what wisdom arises. And, when I took a pause to slow down and to check in, it was beautiful. And this is what happens when we pause and we slow down and we check in, is that the divine was given an opportunity, an entry, an opening. And then I was reminded that, oh my God, my company, where I have W-2 employment, because guess what? Through all of this health crisis that I have been dealing with, I could no longer work in my business. I could no longer build my business in the way that it needed to be built. So that's why you haven't seen or heard a lot from me. In addition to all of this health stuff, there was a lot of just not able to do what I needed to do to make an income and a living for myself, with myself, through myself, as a self-employed person. And so I did have to return to W-2 employment. It was a combination of clinical burnout and, like very severe levels. And then of course compounded with all of this health shit that I had been gaslit on, dismissed, that was complete and utter neglect that I had been telling them for at that point 4 fucking years. And so I thought to myself, oh my gosh, like my employers, and mind you, I'm still building the biz. Like that's not going anywhere, mind you, just in case anyone was confused. The biz is not going anywhere. We're still building that shit. It's just at a different pace, a pace that, you know, works for how life looks right now, given this health condition. So anyways, I softened, I opened, and it created an opening for God to speak through to me. And it came upon me that like, oh my God, my employers, my W-2 employers, open enrollment period was coming up. They had a weird mid-year cycle for open enrollment. And I did the numbers and I did the math and I decided that I was going to take the PPO plan that my company offers. And I did the numbers and I decided I am worth it. And I pursued, so I got that, pursued an outside opinion from someone through the PPO, someone who came highly recommended. Like I had found this person on YouTube when I was doing research initially. I was like, oh, they seem really good, and they are a fibroid specialist, but like, oh, I have Kaiser. Where is this person even? And I'm like, oh wow, this person's actually kind of local to me. They're like an hour away. They're still in the Bay Area. And so like, wow. And then when I had asked, talked to my naturopath, she said, I haven't met this person personally, but I do have a referral for you. Other of my patients have worked with her. They speak highly of her. And she gave me the name. And of course I went and did research and I was like, this person looks familiar. And then I realized this is the same person that I had found on YouTube when I was doing my own research. And I decided, you know what? Hold on, coughing. And I decided, you know what? I am worth it. And so I got the private insurance and I made an appointment to meet with this person. So I turned 41 on July 7th and I went to go meet with this person on July 8th. I had very, very high hopes. And it turns out that I did not click with this person. I did not feel held and cared for by this person. Something was off about it, but they were the first person to tell me. They were like, who says you need a hysterectomy? And I said, Kaiser. And actually they didn't say it that gently. They said, who says you need a hysterectomy? And I was like, Kaiser. And they're like, you do not need a hysterectomy. Like this can easily be done as a fibroid removal, like a myectomy. Myectomy? I don't remember what it's called. And there was a sense of like conflict and confusion because like, although it was a relief, I was already mentally preparing for what if I do have to lose my uterus? What if I do have to say goodbye to, even though I don't want kids now, but like who the fuck knows what could happen in the future, right? And I was like, and the uterus, it just feels like to be a woman and to have womb space, like that is, it just feels so sacred and it did not feel right. And so it was interesting because I was getting ready for, okay, I may need a hysterectomy. And then this doctor says, you don't, like, who says you need that? In a very kind of shamey, judgy way. And I was like, Kaiser, and she's like, you do not need a hysterectomy. This can be done. Cause of course I had uploaded everything I had from Kaiser. I uploaded into her private portal and she had a chance to look at everything and she's like, no. And we went over some options, and we went over the fact that, an MRI, with contrast is what was going to help really give us a very clear picture on what else is going on. Is there a different condition? Adenomyosis. I think that's how it's said. But it's another condition that leads to heavy and profuse bleeding. So she did give me a lot of information. She did help answer a lot of questions that I had. Mind you, I paid $600 privately out of my own pocket for this. I still have to go get reimbursement from my health insurance, the PPO. But she did answer a lot of questions. She did help give me some perspective. And what she had said is, based on the MRI, we're going to have more information. She said that she feels pretty confident that we could do this as a robotic laparoscopic myectomy. So a robot assisted, through teeny tiny little holes, fibroid removal surgery. She's like, I'm pretty confident. And she, did a physical exam and all the things. And she said, I'm pretty confident we can, but the MRI will give us more information. And if it turns out that it's too big, or depending on where it's located, or if it's going to be any complications, then we might have to consider doing an open surgery. And so at that point, I was like, then debating, okay, like if it has to be an open procedure, then you might as well take my uterus, because you're going to cut me open and do an open procedure. I mean, there was all of this that I had been going through and debating. And along the way, I'm talking with friends, and then friends started to tell me like, hey, I actually know someone, or we have a mutual contact, or hey, your aunt had this. This was mine. My aunt, a cousin. It's like a second cousin. I don't know. We don't have a word for cousin in my language. Everyone is brother, sister, uncle, aunt. So it's my mom's cousin, but she's an aunt to me. She's actually my favorite aunt. Don't tell anyone. But I started talking to people. About their experiences, about what choice they made, what choice was right for them, what their procedure was like, what the recovery was like, what was it leading up to the time. And then I had this really interesting conversation with a friend, who shared her story, was that she actually went through Kaiser. She's in Southern California. I hear much better things about Kaiser, Southern California, by the way. But she was in Kaiser. She had the procedure done at Kaiser, Southern California, and she had a very different experience than I had been having. Mind you, she's also a white woman. But she had a very different experience than I did. And it was interesting because I spoke to her the night before I spoke to my Kaiser GYN. And I had been struggling so much. And in my conversation with this friend, I realized, I was like, you know what I need to do? I've been holding on to this so tight. I haven't been letting God do their work. I haven't been letting God work miracles because I'm just so terrified. And so I've been holding on so tight. So in my conversation with her, in addition to hearing all of the wisdom from her experience, I made a decision. I said, you know what? I need to put this on God's desk. This needs to be on God's desk. It cannot be on my desk because it is driving me crazy. And it's just not good for me or my health or my mental health for me to continue holding on and latching on to this. And so what I ended up doing is that's what I did. Like in that conversation with her, I was like, okay, God, I am putting this whole thing on your desk. I absolutely cannot anymore. It is too much. And that was on, I think it was July 13th. July 14th, I had a conversation with my regular GYN. Mind you, I had had such a great conversation with my friend, and I was even, she was like, maybe you could do an intra, regional transfer. You can come and meet with my surgeon. Like I had a great experience, blah, 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 all the things. And then I remembered actually my husband, his company is headquartered in Southern California. And so I actually have a Kaiser Southern California card. Like when they enrolled us in Kaiser, they sent us Kaiser Southern California cards and a medical record number and everything over there. And I was like, actually, I already have a Southern California Kaiser record. Like, interesting. It just opened up a lot more possibilities and options. Cause again, I wasn't feeling so keen on the person that I met privately who, positioned themselves as this expert in fibroids and, came so well, whatever. Like this is like, and I'm telling you this because like, this isn't the first person I met from the internet and proceeded to do services with that was like a hard no. People can say and make themselves and present themselves to be whoever they are on the internet. And I know that I I'm saying this to you over the internet, and I have been building my platform and my brand on the internet as well. And, there are people who can show up really great on the internet, but in person, like, it just doesn't click and vibe. And so if you have been discerning, and if you've been hesitating reaching out to me, or if you've been considering reaching out to anyone, like, be extra really discerning. Like, the internet doesn't mean shit. You have to meet people in person. You have to get a vibe for people in person. But anyhow, I wasn't keen on that person, but I had already put it on God's desk. I was like, okay, God, this is up to you. And I was only meeting with my GYN through Kaiser because I was going through their motions. I hadn't yet decided exactly what I was going to do with Kaiser, but I knew there was at least going to be a member services complaint about this whole thing. I didn't know exactly what big actions, but that's what I had to turn over and put on God's desk. And because I knew I just had to get through my health thing first. And so with that said, I ended up meeting with the GYN through Kaiser, having a conversation with her, asking for the MRI. I got so much fucking pushback from her. I just could not with her. I am firing her. Don't worry. I am firing her. And I'm going to go and get services elsewhere. Interestingly enough, earlier today, I just learned of, I got a couple of good names at a different Kaiser location where the GYNs are allegedly really good. I got so much pushback from her, like literally having to fight tooth and nail, like you have to do in the medical industrial complex, especially in a system like Kaiser. And so she finally said, you know what, why don't I just send you to the surgeon for a second opinion and you can just talk to the surgeon. And I'm like, fine, I will talk to your surgeon. Again, just continuing to go through the motions and doing whatever. And at that moment, I was like, fuck this shit. And I started hardcore reaching out for, to do the referral for the MRI that the private doctor had ordered and all the things, right? And I wasn't sure if I was going to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you this. This is a long ass episode anyway. Just buckle up, baby, brace up. Like, we're here for another few minutes. And by a few minutes, I mean, who knows how much longer, but we are wrapping up, the story and we are almost current. And so I'm calling around for the MRI, and the first place I called told me September 11th. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Mind you, it was July 14th. Okay. And they told me September 11th. And I'm like, no, that is not going to work. I plan to be already recovering from surgery by September 11th. So that is not going to work, because in my heart and in my mind and in my body, I knew, I just had this feeling that this surgery was going to happen sometime between mid and late August. I just knew it in my entire body and being. It was like, that's when it's happening. And so they were like, September 11th. And I'm like, yeah, not going to work. And then I got frustrated and pissed and annoyed and needed some time. And then I started, calling again and calling all the separate locations. And they were all like, yeah, it's going to be a 1 to 2 month wait for an MRI, 1 to 2 month wait for an MRI. It's looking like 2 to 3 months for an MRI. And I'm like, yeah, none of that's going to work. And then I was like, oh, here I am again, trying to force my will, trying to force my timing. And I just said a quick prayer. I was like, oh, right, God, I forgot to include you again. Your timing, not mine. I made another call, and literally the person who answered the phone, they did say, yeah, it's looking like 1 to 2 months, closer to 2 months. And she said, let me check. Now, mind you, I think this is now we're looking at the 15th of July. And she says, let me check. And she goes, oh my gosh, there's actually a cancellation. Someone just canceled on Monday, July 21st. And I was like, oh my God, what? You mean in 6? I was like, I don't care what day, what time. You said cancellation. I am taking it. Thank you to the person who canceled. Hopefully they are well. But I am taking it. No questions asked. And then I was like, wait, you mean the 21st in 6 days? And she's like, yeah, the 21st in 6 days. Done, sold. I don't care that it was all the way in fucking Dublin, an hour away. I'm in traffic. I was like, I don't care. I'm taking it. Done. And that was when these miracles just started unfolding so beautifully. And by then I had already had an appointment for that consult with the surgeon through Kaiser. Oops, you're going to hear some beeping, quite possibly. My Instapot is telling me that my brown rice is done. And so bear with the beeping. Okay, it's done beeping. And so, yeah, turns out I also had an appointment scheduled with the surgeon for a phone consult the very same day at practically the same time. I meant to reschedule the surgeon and I completely forgot. And I'm racing out, to the MRI, on the 21st. Oh, but anyhow, so there was that moment, like I had forgotten to include God. And the moment I remembered and I again created some space for God to work in my life, just the tiniest little opening, that's all God needs to for me to give up a little bit of control and create just a tiny bit of space, the tiniest opening. God worked this miracle. And then I sat down, I ate some food, and then I got tapped on the shoulder. Hey, you have to call Kaiser for those IV infusions too. And I'm like, oh, right, I have to call Kaiser for those IV infusions too. And I started calling the number, and then I was like, oh my God, right, this is going to be they always have a 2-week wait and blah, blah, blah. And I have to fight tooth and nail for it and blah, blah, blah. All of that. And then they never answer their phone. And guess what? All of this chatter was happening as the phone was ringing. And within 1 to 2 rings, they answered the phone. And I was like, oh my God, you answered the phone. You can help. I was like, my doctor made a referral, not the GYN, but my regular PCP. She made a referral. I'm preparing to have a procedure. Look, I was already speaking as though the procedure was scheduled. I was like, I am preparing to have a procedure. We need to get my iron levels back up. I don't know if she put it in as an urgent referral, but I am requesting this because I need a procedure done and we need to get these levels up. Lo and behold, again, miraculously, the very next day, they were able to get me in the very next day, to start a series of 5 iron infusions. So to help me get my iron levels and those ferritin levels, most importantly, boosted back up so that I could get the procedure done. And oh my God, it was so miraculous. Now, mind you, I'm just pulling in. I'm trying to park in the tiny ass parking spots they have at the MRI place in Dublin. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot park, blah, blah, blah. The phone starts ringing and it's the surgeon from Kaiser. And I had completely forgotten to reschedule that. So I answered the call and I said, I'm so sorry. I'm walking into another appointment. I forgot to reschedule. She says, no problem. No worries. I can call you later. When are you free? And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I'll be done at this time. And she's like, well, I'm going to be headed into surgery, but I will do my best to call you before I go into surgery. Meanwhile, I completely forgot, right? I get my MRI done. I drive all the way back from Dublin, all the things. And I'm getting ready to do life. I had the shower. I had the tap turned on. I was getting ready to get into the shower. I had the tap turned on and I just said, you know what? Let me check my work phones. Let me just check my phones to see if anything has come up, that I might need to attend to before I jump into the shower real fast. Well, I had just had a missed call from Kaiser and I was like, fuck. So I'm trying to call back. And as I'm looking up the phone number for Kaiser's GYN department, they called again and it was the surgeon. So of course I'm running to turn off the tap, in the bathroom, turning off the tap and having this call with her. And at first she was doing the Kaiser nonsense and I was like, wah. And then I don't know what happened. Maybe I said a prayer real fast. I don't fucking know what happened. But again, God worked a miracle and God said to me, God just worked a miracle. And that's when she started saying, because what I told her is that the GYN keeps telling me hysterectomy. And that just feels too extreme. And she looks at my record and she says, yeah, given your age, you're only 41. That is very extreme because you never know what might happen. You think you don't want children now, but you never know in the future what might happen. You have at least 10 more years until menopause, statistically. And you don't know what can happen. You can use a donor egg, whatever. You never know. But if I remove your uterus, if I take your uterus, that is non-refundable. You cannot have it back. I cannot give it back to you. And so absolutely, because of your age and how young you are and you never know what could happen, what could change, absolutely, a hysterectomy is extreme. Of course, it is the definitive option, but it is extreme. And so instead, here's what we could do based on everything. And we talked about an MRI and all the things, and she was going to order an MRI. And then I said to her, I was like, hey, doc, between you and me, like, I ended up going and getting an opinion privately, and I just went and got a private MRI done elsewhere. And so they just did that this morning. That's the appointment I was walking into. And she's like, great, get me the images, get me the MRI report. Like, as soon as you have anything, let me know, send me a message. Like, I'm going to message you so that you have an easy contact information for me, a way to contact me back, and you can just reply back there as soon as you get the report. And I was like, oh my God, like it all just started working out so quickly. And with her, I was shocked, absolutely shocked that I actually connected with her. I felt something and I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. And I called my mom and I debriefed the call with my mom, and who had also completely forgotten that Kaiser's surgeon was going to call me that day, and had this conversation with my mom. And my mom says, it sounds like she was really caring. And I was like, oh my God, yes, that is the word. I felt that she truly cared. And I was blown away that I was like, wow, I might actually go with this person for the procedure. And she had already told me that if it was just the one big fibroid, she could probably squeeze me in, because I was like, what are we looking at in timings? She's like, yeah, it's looking kind of far out there, but I have this one pocket available on the August 21st, right smack in the middle of mid to late August. August 21st, I think I can get you in based on what your MRI says. If it's going to be just that one, it's going to be simple. It's going to be straightforward, and I think I can squeeze you in. But as soon as you get that MRI results and the images, you let me know, you send me the reports, you give me the images, and we will confirm that. Well, guess what? Then I start oh my gosh, I need to log into this try to figure out how to get that record, blah, 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 all the things. By the time I figured out how to get into the system for the private healthcare system that I had gone into, oh no,